Ladies and gentlemen of the Red Special Guitar Podcast, welcome from Phoenix, Arizona. Today is the day after the second ever US Red Special Guitar Meetup, and I am so pleased to be able to welcome my good friend Gonzalo Plaza, who's come all the way from New Hampshire in... New Hampshire?
Exeter, New Hampshire.
Exeter, New Hampshire. Very close to Exeter, near Newton Abbot, near Devon, where I come from, to join us for the meetup, and we thought it would be a fantastic time to get a Red Special Guitar Podcast with you, Gonzalo. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Very glad to to be here. Lovely experience at the meetup. Lovely to meet new friends. It doesn't happen that often in this brave new world. So it was fantastic meeting you and Doug and Luke. So it's been a great experience.
No, I'm so glad I convinced you to come.
Twist my arm.
No, so Gonzalo, you've been around the Red Special and the Red Special world since the dawn of the internet, probably, and before, but you had a big hand in the internet presence of the Red Special.
That's an accurate representation of it. It's weird because listening to your podcast, I was completely unprepared I'm sorry, I don't remember who was the first person that mentioned my name, and I'm like, how people remember this? Like I had no idea that it had any kind of impact. I'm very glad that it did, but yeah, I think it was around '94 that my brother went to college and he had access to the first internet connections, based on his studies, and that's how I started getting a little bit involved learning HTML. And again, it was all secondary from what he was learning, the access that he was having, and of course one of the first things that that I was passionate at that time was Queen's music and Brian May. So you try to look for things and there's nothing. There's literally nothing. One of the first pages that I found was Andy Young's Queen page, which at that point it was the unofficial official page. It was the one that has the most amount of information, from lyrics to interviews, tablatures for guitar players, etc., etc. So I immediately, read everything, a wealth of information when nothing was available. And I remember exchanging a couple of emails with Andy. He was super nice with me, and whenever I had any piece of information that I could, we have a hummingbird. Any piece of information that I had for some reason that he didn't have, I tried to make it available, and he would start, posting things. So it was weird because there was a little bit of information about Freddie, a little bit of Royer, a little bit of John, and then the Brian May, started stacking up pretty quickly. And I don't remember how the decision came about of breaking up, which wasn't the case, but to have something specific for Brian May, I probably had done something with HTML at that point, all manual. There were no software. The first guide that I had, for those of you who know HTML, it came with a warning that says most browsers don't support tables. It was just that primitive. But I created that that first page, and most of the information I had at the beginning was the information that I provided to Andy, or some of the information that I could take from Andy's page. We were linking back and forth. And then any information found its way to me, I tried to post it. And I think that's where it became a little bit of the de facto Brian May starting page. I'm not sure about the timeline on when Mark started his page. We're probably fairly close. And of course, just the amount of information that Mark and the access that Mark had, I could never had at that point. I'm born and raised in Chile. It's literally, you look at the map when it's falling, falling off the planet. That's where I'm from. People here in the United States says that they have a Southern accent, and I'm like, no, I have a Southern accent. So I don't, I don't think there's any competition or anything like that.
Yeah.
We were all glad of whatever information was available and amazed that people were into the Red Special and into Brian May and into Queen. So it was a very fascinating time. I was telling you a couple of minutes ago, my brother came to the United States for something, I don't remember what, and I asked him, go to a guitar store and just ask for brochures, anything. Like we get nothing over there.
Yeah.
So he came back from the trip. He brought me, a decent amount of catalogs. The majority completely meaningless, not things that interest me. A couple of things a little bit, more higher up that were interesting. And in the middle, there was a Guild catalog with the Red Special on top, and it was one of those like mind-blowing moments. And opening it up, and the 394 version, the 01, which is more like the Red Special, and then the other variations, and again, absolutely mind-blowing. Immediately tried to scan them at very poor resolution, which was the only thing that was available at the time. Posted them, and people were immediately like, "Where did you get this catalog?" And I'm like, "I don't even know the store. I never even went there." So there was a lot of that, and I think probably a year or so, plus or minus, I was able to convince my parents to let me acquire a Red Special.
Yeah.
There was a lot of convincing from my part, and used all my savings. And I found a store I think it was in Tennessee, somewhere, maybe in Nashville, that mostly dealt with Guild guitars, mostly acoustic. And they had a web page. I was always checking on them, and all of a sudden they're like, "We have a Guild Brian May," and the price was reasonable. I checked with them, shipping, etc., and all the transactions done via fax. Nobody would email a credit card or anything like that. And yeah, September of '96, if I'm not mistaken, I got my Guild Brian May, opened the box, and this pedal comes flying out, and I'm like, I didn't even know this existed, and that became my my precious guitar.
Yeah.
It's funny because I met a couple of people. There was one big Queen tribute band in Chile, and the guitar player played a Les Paul. There were no BMGs at that time. It was only basically the Greco, which from Japan to Chile is it's a different world. The guilds that most people didn't even know that existed. So people were playing Strats or Les Pauls or whatever, and he knew my guitar teacher. There was something like that. So I remember meeting him at one time, and he tried to convince me to sell him my guitar, and I'm like no, like I can try to find another one for you, but I will not sell you mine. So yeah, I kind of became the Guild guy on the internet, always having a fascination with the 84, which I've never touched one so far. The 93, I think the only one that I've ever seen is mine.
Yeah. And it's a lovely guitar.
It's not perfect. It is not a perfect copy of the Red Special, but it holds a lot of sentimental value for me of my journey, and it's been with me, 2/3 of my life or close to that. So yeah.
You can see yesterday at the meetup, Gonzalo got to play the Guild through the full Brian May rig, and is that the first time you've played it through 3 AC30s?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Gonzalo was, I'd say, we had a lot of other people playing who were all different levels of skill in playing, and playing through the big AC30 rig can be quite overwhelming because it's quite powerful and whatnot. But I witnessed you play Love of My Life, and that's one of the highlights of the meetup for me, because I'll try and find a video or put it up somewhere, but like everyone in the room started singing as you were playing, and then Carlos got up and did the singing. But it's just such a lovely thing to do. How did it feel playing?
So first of all, it's the absolute wrong thing to play through the Red Special with an AC30 setup, but there were no acoustic, and I'm a terrible guitar player. Like people are like, "Are you a musician?" Absolutely not a musician.
You're not terrible at all.
I'm a terrible guitarist.
No, you're not.
I know how to play a couple of things pretty decently. Love My Life being one of them, and I didn't even do a good job for my standards. But it was I wanted to present something different.
Yeah.
People were, of course, we all fall into Hammer to Fall, Iron Man Down, One Vision, logically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was like, oh, let me jump in and start playing, and then it caught up. It was lovely.
It was a good moment. It really, I think it was one of those points where you're aware that something really special was happening, because literally everyone started singing "Love of My Life" together, and it just felt like a really solid group of individuals there with a common goal. And
this is way above my my style of playing. It felt a little bit like when Brian's on stage and he's like, I don't need to sing. This is for everybody.
Yeah, no, it was brilliant. So thank you for doing that.
My absolute pleasure.
So just going back through your story, we touched on you falling in love with the Red Special before the internet came around, so that you're literally talking about magazines and maybe footage of Brian playing or album cover sleeves and whatnot. Can you remember the first, what got you into Queen? What song was it?
I came prepared for that question. But the interesting thing is that I think it happens with everybody. You always had a notion that of Queen. Maybe you didn't know the band name. Maybe you didn't know anything else. But it's been ever present on everybody's life since the 70s. Yeah. The first thing that I know for sure, there was a commercial for Shell, the gas company, and it was a weird commercial that started with close-up of a hand grabbing a cassette, opening Queen The Works, putting the cassette on the tape of a car, and starting to drive to the intro of I Want to Break Free.
Right.
And I remember being fascinated by that sound, and not knowing anything else from the band. And a couple of years later, I think there were a couple of songs that were catching my ear. But again, I wasn't very into Queen at that point, or very aware of Queen. I was more into Phil Collins, a little bit of Genesis, that kind of music. And I went to an album store, like a record store, and they had the Greatest Hits 2, and for some reason it was mislabeled, and the price was very cheap for the time. So I bought it when I was like, oh, if I would like one or two songs, that's fine. And I remember opening the booklet and seeing, scruffy Brian with the Red Special and that cowboy tie, the white shirt, and it was like, he looked like a Highlander, like from the movie, and but then it was the guitar. There was something about the guitar that caught my eye, and then watching the Who Wants to Live Forever video with Brian in the middle of the violins, and it's like, that guitar looks like a violin, it absolutely. And little by little getting into it, and then when you learn that Brian made that guitar, I'm like, okay, sure, like he made the guitar, but he really made the guitar? And then you start looking at that, he really made the guitar. And then you're like, okay, but and it's all those little details that you start feeling more and more connected.
Yeah.
And I think there's also like a timing thing in your life. I was probably 12, 13, and I think that's a very impressionable age.
Definitely, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, as you can see, you slowly started coming to realise who you are, and not completely, but you get comfortable. You not necessarily having to follow everyone else. You go, oh, well, I like this, and that's okay, and I can do my own thing, and you start to sort of plant the seeds of defining who you are as a person, don't you, at that sort of age?
Absolutely, and there's certain things that drive you through certain passions and certain things, and you start finding commonalities, and it's like, oh, this person also likes this other thing, and I like that thing as well. So it's very interesting how those moments in your life are like life defining.
And they often come with music as well, don't they? Because you're having that defining moment, and either you go back to a song, or the song comes on the radio, and you're feeling an emotion, and something happens, and then that music, like, I know when I listen to certain songs, it reminds me of how I felt either the first time I heard it, or the time when something important, like a crossroads in my life, happened, and whether it's a negative or a positive, that song brings back an element of that emotion each time. And for me, it's always been Queen songs, and I think for all of us, it's usually Queen songs, and that's why you get so intertwined with it as part of your lifestyle.
Absolutely, and it's, the first time it might have been in the Guitar Player magazine interview, Brian May talking about recording an album with Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
You're like, but these are completely different guitar playing styles. And then I remember it took me many years to find probably MP3 versions downloaded through like Napster or something like that, and being completely mind blown of everything and how weirdly diverse are three songs.
Yeah.
From two phenomenal guitar players with phenomenal backing band. But yeah, it all started to, like, make sense in your life, and it started driving you. One of the two times that I met Brian, I'm pretty sure that I told him that he was a big influence in my life. But something that I've told other people is like, well, out of all of the musicians, all the famous people that I could have picked, you don't really pick, like they pick you. It's the other way around. But what a phenomenal guy to be to have as your idol.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's something so innocent in it as well. Maybe innocent's not the right word, but I fell in love. I mean, I love the music, and I know we all love the music, and that's what catches us. But it was the story of the Red Special that really grabbed my attention, and that act of a father and son building something out of the fact they couldn't afford it, and he carries on using it, and it was just awesome. And there's something quite humbling about that as like an origin story, really, for him. And it's a theme that I think we all sort of relate to, and it grabs us all, and it makes him a lot more human, doesn't it? Rather than some guitar players that can go and pick up a Strat and then they have I don't know what I'm trying to say, really, Gonzalo. I've lost my.
No, and let me tell you a little story. My grandfather was and I always get them confused. Merchant Marine. Merchant Marine.
Yeah, merchant sailor. Yeah.
Merchant Marine. So he did a lot of traveling. The 30s and 40s and 50s. When my dad was born and grew up, my dad always wanted to play the drums. They didn't have the money to buy drums. There were not a lot available. So my dad started making himself a drum kit. And my grandfather will bring pieces and catalogs and things like that. So in a certain way, I come from a tradition of amateur luthiers, if you will. It's a big word, but that's exactly it. When you see that, this guy who has played all over the world, the biggest records, that guitar was made between him and his father, the same way that my dad did it with him, the same way that I build things with my dad. It's a beautiful story.
Definitely. And I guess maybe I've realised the point I was trying to make was that it just shows you that it's not necessarily about whether or not you're born into money, but if you've got the talent and the want to do something, you can build a guitar and become a rock star and a doctor and a kick-ass astrophysicist rock star. And I think that's quite a lovely thing, because it's such a good lesson for people to learn today, that you don't need to go out and buy all of the gear to be able to do something. Like, Brian couldn't afford a guitar, so him and his dad spent a year and a half making one. There's such a modern way of, well, I want a guitar, so I need to be able to buy it instantly. And the internet has unfortunately moved, or fortunately, depending which way you look at it, into that mindset of, I want to buy a Red Special. Well, I can go online today and I can click on Guitar Center, especially here in the States, and I can get it here tomorrow.
If it doesn't arrive tomorrow, I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
And I'm not paying shipping either, and it's crazy. But that's absolutely right. There's, especially for myself growing up, I suffer a lot of, wanted things to be immediate, and understanding the process of making, that you can build something with your hands, that it will never be perfect, that you need to accept those, you need to accept it's the journey, it's not the destination.
Definitely, 100%.
And to also take pride of what you do with your hands.
Yeah.
It might not be perfect, but it might be pretty good.
Yeah, and I think really what's interesting as well is what's not perfect to you is often perfect to someone else.
Absolutely.
And I think we're all really self-critical, and I think probably, and it'd be a really interesting question to Brian to ask him, would be what things would you have done differently, or what things went wrong when you were making it, because there will be things on the guitar that he knows about, the same way that we were talking about yesterday, there's things on my guitar that I know that I made a mistake with, but maybe the skill of someone finishing or making something isn't getting it right, but it's what you do to either cover those mistakes up or hide them or make the best thing from them. It'd be really interesting to chat to him. And I know we were talking to Carlos yesterday about his Red Special, weren't we, and how he's made a few errors and things that he's learned from that he would then do differently next time. It's just, I find the whole thing so fascinating. It's a really, just such a, I don't know, it's you really start to learn who you are as well, don't you, when you're doing it and working with your hands. I think it's quite an eye-opening experience in more ways than just physically making something.
Absolutely. And we all in our mind have, I'm going to say, the Live at the Brixton Academy picture of the Red Special from the front. Absolutely perfect, glorious in all its majesty. And we all self-criticize our work, but probably whoever has held the Red Special have mentioned that no, it's not perfect.
No.
But again, you have that mind and you want to achieve that, which you can never achieve and you shouldn't achieve. Yeah. And it's again the journey, the discovery, the obsessing with the most crazy small detail.
None of us do that, Gonzalo. No, that's not what we do.
It's only me. I'm in the wrong podcast then. No, it's again that's part of the fascinating thing about this group of people and this group of fans of Brian May, that it's again it will be, and I don't want to disparage any of the other great musicians, but you can go to a store and buy all the gear that Eric Clapton, with enough money, that Eric Clapton has, or that Eddie Van Halen used to. You can. There's one Red Special.
Yeah, definitely, and it's so. I find your story really interesting because I've known of you since early on in my life, and I know you mentioned earlier that you found it quite funny that people mentioned you in the podcast. Your name's actually come up pretty often in all of the what I would call sort of the original forum members that I've interviewed or spoken to on the podcast, and everyone remembers you. So it's it's really nice when you actually, because I didn't seek you out to find you, you found me, and that was a really nice moment because I was like, it was quite humbling for me because I was thinking I'm doing this podcast thing which was created out of COVID really and the lack of ability to meet up with people. So, and a little bit of, we're all getting older, so we need to document this stuff for the next generation.
Absolutely.
And then in my inbox is Gonzalo Plaza, and I'm thinking, hang on, we've just spoken about him a few times, and he was, to me, sort of probably the father of the Red Special on the internet, and now he's sending me messages, and he's like, you're doing a great thing. It's quite a nice compliment for me doing this, and it was lovely. So thank you for finding it.
And again, and I think I mentioned that on my original message, and I don't remember how I got to. It probably was the Facebook group where somebody posted, maybe you posted that about the podcast, and I remember downloaded that first episode and be like, this is not going to cut it. Like I'm too picky. And then you were talking with Luke about the first meetup, and I'm like, why did I not know about the meetup? Like, why? I would have totally gone to the first meetup, And I think the approach that you have with the podcast of, it will be really easy for somebody to make a podcast or a video or something like that to talk about every single detail. But the Red Special, I think at this point, is about the people and the community. It's yes, it is about the guitar, but it's what the guitar has meant to the world and to these people. So I think the approach is absolutely perfect, and I agree. At some point in 100 years, maybe somebody's going to do some research about the Red Special and is going to find out this, you know, treasure chest of knowledge
Yeah.
that is not information, is knowledge and perspective. Fernando was saying
Yeah.
yesterday, and that's way more valuable.
Definitely, and it's it's to me it's the gift that keeps on giving, because not only is the guitar this iconic thing, and it's not produced, but Brian's been able to use it as a tool to make all this music, and he's got this link to his father every time he picks it up, and it clearly means the world to him, as it should do, and it means the world to us. But it's then created this whole other sort of community that I guess they would never even would have considered outside of Queen fans, of people like yourself, myself, Doug, Luke, everyone else that's been on the podcast, and was it 4,500 people on the Facebook page now that just love the guitar, and I just think it's so magical, because like yesterday we were at this meetup, and you've got young kids there that have never played through an AC30, and you feel like a proud dad when they pick it up and you see their face as they're in control of this full-on Brian May rig, or they look at a replica like Luke's replica, and get to play your. I mean, I was like a kid in the toy shop playing Your Guild yesterday, just because it was an iconic thing for me, researching the Red Special, or the Guild's the only other real option at that point, and actually having the opportunity to play one and then play yours and know what it means to you, and have your approval to let me play it. That's another big thing. And what's so lovely is everyone's just there to share, and you get lots of groups where people would be like, "No, you can't touch my, you can't touch my Guild."
It was amazing. It's amazing the amount of. It's a strong word, but the amount of love that you feel in something like this, absolutely. And it felt a little bit like, when, I'm not a father, but I would imagine that, when your kid goes in their first car ride by their own, and it's like, go on, my child, there's a road for you ahead, and you feel a little bit when you see the young kids.
No, it's good. And what I find really interesting as well is, like, I know we spoke before, and
hopefully my makeup's not going
to it's so, but it evokes emotion, doesn't it? And the whole thing it's more than the sum of the guitar. It's the whole thing creates this feeling of brothership, of family across the globe, and that's really hard to get on the forum in written communication. But being able to meet people and see people and like
shake hands
and talk to each other face to face. I knew pretty much early on when you started messaging me. I felt like I had a good measure of you, and now meeting you, you're like, you've exceeded my expectations of who you would be.
I likewise, and same thing with everybody. Like literally, it could not be a lovelier group of people and more giving. And again, the fact that everybody can be like, you want to play my guitar, play my guitar. Like, they're all different. There's not a better Red Special. We're all here. We want to learn. We want to experience. And again, it's funny, as you were saying about the Guild. Again, I don't think that I've ever seen another Guild, not an 84, not in person. But I've never played a Guyton. I would love to have my hands around a Guyton. I've played Luke's, and it's amazing. And Luke's like, oh, that's wrong. And I'm like, no, that's not wrong. It's perfect. It's perfect as it is. I was showing Ron the tremolo bridge of my guitar, which my understanding is was made by Schaller in Germany. And Ron was fascinated by it. And I'm like, you made the gold standard now, man. Like this is good. Yours are way better. And it was a lovely moment.
Yeah, definitely. And there's lots of lovely moments. I think that's the one negative is you can't be everywhere to see all of the lovely moments. But what's so great with the meetup is that over the next coming weeks, you'll start to see these little snippets of stories coming up, and people writing little blogs, or Andrek's vlog, and Luke will probably post a message up, and I'll probably put some more stuff up of the little things that you did witness. And then you get to see like your experience by looking at your photos, and you see it from your eyes, and then you get to see it from Doug's when Doug will post his eye. it's just so lovely to be able to do that as well, because it's almost like when you get married, you try really hard to see everyone at the wedding to say thank you. Don't
Yes.
say thank you for coming, but you actually find that your time is really limited with everyone, and then you start to see other people's photos and experiences, and you can see people laughing at a table, so clearly having a nice time, and it's a bit like that, really.
Absolutely. The one advice I was given on my wedding day, like it just goes that fast, and it felt a little bit like that. Like when we were like wrapping up, I'm like I need to take pictures of the pedals. I will never see the amount of different travel boosters that are here. In the other important thing that I want to convey that the word, in the realm of what we're talking. I was always an odd duck growing up for a myriad of reasons. And I think when you read more about Brian May, you kind of feel like all the four of them in Quint were kind of odd ducks. Brian probably the oddest of them all. You feel a little bit of a connection. And seeing, that if we can give a little bit of a safe space for kids that might be the weirdos among their school, and they can feel that they're appreciated and they have something that they can share and they can get from it. What a lovely thing.
Well, and again, it is such a lovely thing, and one of the other, there's so many lovely stories from yesterday and all of the meetups, but is Carlos coming along from Mexico, doesn't speak a word of English, but the smile on his face and you were able to translate for him a little bit, and Fernando, the drummer, was able to, and then he was using this. You could see he was just having an absolute whale of a time, and he didn't feel like there was any real language barrier when you were talking to him or showing him things, because you just knew what he was getting at.
When you want to communicate, you make it work.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter the language, it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, we all speak Red Special.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be in an actual language. It's like the Esperanto of the guitar world.
But it's just so lovely, and it's you often feel like you're going on that journey on your own. And I think you talking about being the odd duck, we're all going through that in our own blinkered way. And when you come across the forum or the information, and you realise actually there's loads of other people into this, and there's going through the same thing, it's quite a nice thing. And then getting to meet people and putting faces to names, and it's just such a lovely thing. But yeah, no, it's a shame that it goes so quickly, because you could, luckily you're around today so we can get to hang out again a bit more, but it does go in the blink of an eye, which is a shame.
And the reality is that this could probably be like one of those KISS conventions that we could be, for a couple of days of, playing the rigs, testing the different treble boosters, et cetera, et cetera. But I also feel that the fact that it's so intense in such a short period of time, it makes it a little bit more, more special. Definitely. If it will dilute over time.
Definitely, and it makes you, you've got to do the things that you want to do quickly, and you've got to do that. And what's great is we had the meal on the Friday night as well before the meetup, like we do in the UK, which is just fantastic, because you get to speak to everyone and meet everyone. So you kind of got all that out of the way.
Without guitars, which I think is very important.
And you've got all of that out of the way. So when you do see people, it's not the first time you've spoken to them, and because you've done all that stuff. And then when it comes to the meetup, it's right, we can focus on the guitars now. And then we all went to In-N-Out Burger last night to keep the magic alive.
Yep. If you're in the West Coast, that's what you have to do.
Just going back to your story though, it's completely different than it is now. If you were to come to the Red Special now, there's so much information out there that you can find, and that you can, you've got Simon Bradley's book, which is a fantastic resource. You've got all of the info on the Gaitons. You've got people like Luke Holwerda who've made those fantastic videos on how to make a Red Special. You've got Doug's guitar blog on how Doug has approached it and his videos, and there's so you've got parts that you can make from Ron. Back when you started this, was your intention to build your own, or was it?
I'm surprised that you're asking me that question, and this is not prepared. Um, I actually had it written down because for a good reason. So let me look it up. So in December of 1990, in the Latin version of Popular Mechanics, it was how to build your own guitar. It was kind of like a Fender thin line kind of ish guitar, and I don't think that I played guitar at the time, but something caught my eye, and I'm like, I want to do this, which is crazy. Um, and I remember talking with my parents, and they're like, "Why don't you try find a luthier that can help you?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I opened the yellow pages, look whoever was closest to my house as a classical guitar luthier, and I. This is the kind of things that you do when you're young. You have no. I went there, knocking the door, and like I brought the magazine, and I'm like, "Can you help me do this?" And I don't know why he saw something. And he helped me build my first guitar, which was, I'm going to call it a mixture between that tele style. There's a lot of influences of the Red Special, of course, but there was a lot of things that I didn't know what they were or how you would go to. I knew about the on off and the phase switches. I didn't know what out of phase meant, or how to wire it that way. Um, but there was definitely a lot of influence on that guitar, and I think a little bit on the back of my mind when I was putting that page was eventually we're going to get to a point where somebody's going to be able to take this information and help them in that journey. Um, I do want to do a quick shout out to, and hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, to Dennis Pinter, who is a gentleman from Hungary, and we exchange a lot of emails. Probably, if you've played a tablature from Queen, chances that their hits are pretty high, and at some point we discussed on how to play like Brian May guide. There was no YouTube at that time or whatever, and videos like they were non-existent. And we came a little bit with the challenge of technology, but in the back of our mind was, yes, how can we convey this information in a better way so people can achieve a little bit of either if you want to go into the playing part or you want to go into the building part, that you have more information.
And that's really, it's often I found a lot of this stuff when I came into this, and we would have all found it at a certain point, especially those of us that have been around the thing for a long time. And you often find that information, but you don't always question why it's there. You just go, oh, there's some information, I'm going to take that and use it. And it's really interesting listening to you say that it's a conscious decision to actually help people rather than just somewhere to store it, or you could have chosen not to do that, and you could have just talked amongst yourselves about it and got better yourself. But you actually you wanted to give back, you wanted to help other people, and that's, again, I think you should be commended for that, because at a time where the internet wasn't easy, and you probably didn't know what it could be, and it was a ball ache, and it was a 56k dial-up modem, and everything took forever. And I can look at my phone now, and within a second I've got a web page up and I can watch YouTube videos and how to sound like Brian May. You need a pat on the back, Gonzalo, for persevering with it, and you're pretty much the father of the Red Special community, with those initial conversations you had and that want to help other people.
Thank you. And again, I can't claim all the accolades. There were a lot of people that from all over the world that they send me information. Some of the information they send me privately that I couldn't share. Some of the information they're like, please, you have a platform, please do share it. Everett would send me an enormous amount of information. Laurens Gantenier from Belgium, he sent me, we're still in contact till this day, of his build and albums and songs that and I remember getting little packages in the mail that took months and months with cassettes, with recordings and physical pictures of his build. And again, people were very kind to me for no other reason that we're all in this journey together.
No, I think, and I think, again, you could have chosen not to share those things or not do that, and that's having known you via message now for well over a year, and now meeting you. It's such your character to just be there to help people and try and provide people with information or a nice experience. It's even more compounded when I met you, just because of how lovely you are, really.
I thank you.
It's like talking to you across the weekend and on Friday when you came over to the Airbnb and you came to the front door, and it was talking to you to begin with. It's like I'd known you for 20 years. It didn't feel like I'd just met you. It's almost like your family, really.
It's very funny you mentioned that, because I'm parking and I'm like, wait, like John has never heard me.
Yeah.
He's seen my picture. I've heard you on the podcast, of course, but like he doesn't know how I sound. I get this is mind blowing.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, isn't it? But again, without any of the Red Specialty stuff, we would never have. There's so many interesting common links and stories that we all share a similar path, and that's the really interesting thing. Listening back to the podcast is how similar everyone's story really is. When you listen, you're like, well, that was the same for me, and that was the same for me, and
100%. And it's funny because I think I was listening to the Ariel podcast, and it dawned on me how dissimilar in time and space all of our stories are, and how many similarities. And it's not only the Red Special. I think the fact that people are open. They don't take anything for granted. And I think the other thing, especially for the young people out there, be prepared. Be willing to go out of your comfort zone. Don't be shy about asking somebody, can I do this? Don't demand anything. I think the people that go into that mindset, they go the wrong way. Definitely. And it never works for them. But the amount of people that ask nicely for something that is completely mind-blowing, and then people are going to open the doors for you, it's extraordinary.
Definitely. And the other thing I find really interesting is how our taste is very similar in other things outside of the Red Special. It's like your love of Disney and Star Wars and all of the other things that we that we talk about and share. You can argue that those things are massive and they would have influenced lots of people, so the chances are quite similar, but to me, it's always quite special when you meet people that have really got a similar interest to you, even if there's an age difference. And the Red Special must attract a certain type of individual that has certain values and certain ways in the world, because we're all so similar, really.
Yeah, and I still have hard time singing Bicycle Race. It says, and I don't like Star Wars. I changed it, and I do like Star Wars, which is also funny to see how much of a fan Brian is. It again, it's very interesting if you would make like a Venn diagram, the amount of intersection of visual artist and music and other things. And I think it's all. There are certain things that were very directly influenced by Brian, and there's certain things that were indirectly influenced by Brian, and maybe we're all more aware of nature and animals and eating better, and things like that. Just because you're like, okay, this person that I admire that has been very logical and reasonable all of his life is making a good point, I'll listen to that.
Definitely. And he's such an interesting character himself. And, there's so many things we can learn from him, from his humble upbringing and building a guitar. The whole thing's fascinating. We could talk about that forever, and we do. But back to you. So you obviously you've made this guitar, well, not obviously, but you've said you made this guitar with the luthier in Chile, and that was the first one that you'd made. How did it turn out?
Not great, like a first guitar.
Have you still got it?
It's in pieces.
Yeah.
I am putting it slowly back together. And my mom always bugs me that it doesn't need to be playable, but it needs to be put together. So I'm slowly going through that process among the millions of other projects. So again, it wasn't a great guitar. It will never be a great guitar. It was a great learning experience.
Definitely. And that, having built a guitar or two myself, build the first one and don't expect too much and don't be too hard on yourself, because you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn a lot about the process and yourself and how you deal with things. So you went on from there. So you built that first guitar. Did you then get the bug, or was it later on you've decided, because you're building several guitars at the moment?
Correct. So when I built the first electric guitar, I was 14, probably around that, 14, 15. I went to college for a couple of years. That didn't work out. It was sound engineering. I am tone deaf, and it kind of doesn't work. So I was in between colleges, and I thought to myself, what I would like to do. I picked to go into computer IT stuff because I had a knack for it. It looked like a profession where I could do well for myself.
Yep.
But that's not a passion. So it's like, what? And I was like, well, I would really love to go back to. So I went back to who I call my mentor, Eduardo Moreno. I went back to him and I'm like, you don't have a web page. I know how to make web pages. How do we trade? I'll make your web page. You teach me how to build guitars. So I was, for a period, I think probably about 3 years, I was either going half a day or a couple of hours a week. And I worked in his workshop. I was building my own classical guitar and then an acoustic bass. And that was very, very fulfilling. And I think that's where I realized that was a passion of mine.
Yeah.
I will never be a decent guitar player by any stretch of the imagination. I will never be great.
I would disagree there.
We'll agree to disagree. But the building something that you can give a great guitarist, and then they can do something with that.
Yeah.
Having the ability to build a tool for somebody and that person to make something great with that, it's fascinating.
Definitely. And it really is, and that's something that speaks volumes to me. I don't personally see myself as a builder of things very well, so I wouldn't do that. But in my life, I've spent a lot of time trying to invest in people to get the best out of them.
It's the same.
And it just did without a physical thing, but it's such a rewarding thing to be able to do, and what a wonderful aspiration.
Absolutely. When I was building my first guitar, Eduardo made a 10-string classical guitar. The weirdest looking guitar you've seen. It was beautiful, Indian mahogany, Indian rosewood. It's absolutely gorgeous. And one day, somebody came to try a guitar, and he was like, take it home. It's yours. And everybody's like, what? Like, that there's money there. And he's like, no, like, that guitar belongs with him.
Yeah.
He needs to go and make music with that. And what a lovely feeling that is.
Definitely. It'd be really interesting to go through sort of what's led you to where you are today, I think. So, like, you did all this stuff on the forum originally, and you created all that information. Obviously, at some point, the internet started to catch up with progression, and you could upload a photo and it didn't take half a day. You could download stuff, and then we started seeing a little bit more information about the Red Special coming out. So in 1998, when Greg Fryer restored it, there was that lovely article in Guitar magazine where it started to lift the veil a little bit more. So how did that affect you? With what you were doing? Because obviously before that point, information was really scarce. You're talking interviews with Brian, snippets from magazines, bits and sound bites from TV, little bits of information from probably Mark Reynolds and Julian Hemingway.
Yep.
And then that sort of 1908 starts to happen, and all of a sudden the lift or the lid ever so slightly starts to come off.
Yep, and I think there was a crossroad of different things of what was happening in my life in terms of studying, relationship, et cetera, et cetera. A couple of years before that, I started on my page I don't remember what was the official name, but like the Red Special Owners List.
Yeah.
And I tell people now, in my 40s, the reality is that there were two big reasons to have that. One is bragging rights. Absolutely, yeah. Let's not kid ourselves. But the main reason was, in my mind, knowing that there were not a lot of guitars available. If Brian was somewhere in the world and he wanted to take play something, and he wanted a Red Special, for him to have a place where he could be like, let's have my management email this person and like, hey, can we borrow your guitar for a day? Who's going to say no? Yeah. And I know that we've had examples of something similar happening. So in my mind, that made it real that the purpose that I put that it never fulfilled. Yeah. But that was there.
And again, just listening to the reason, I know we talked about this earlier before we started recording, but why you did that is so interesting. Like the motivate, what people do is obviously interesting, but the why behind it I find even more interesting. And that you were thinking like that to try and help Brian if he was somewhere and like, I need to play something and I didn't bring the Red Special with me. I can get hold of someone. And I'd never even considered that was the reason. I'd always just assumed it was like a
bragging rights.
Yeah, or even like a repository of information. Like, it'd be really interesting to know there's so many guilds made. Let's try and find out who owns them all, so that information is held somewhere. So you can go, I've got number 231. I wonder who's number 230. You can go, look, it's Gonzalo's got that one. So he's my guild brother.
There was absolutely part of that, and I've always been interested in data, and it's funny how my career led me into data and analytics and data warehousing and all of that. But again, the main goal was that of trying to eventually potentially help Brian. And unfortunately, I think around that same time, I found somebody was lifting the information of my page and publishing it on their page, claiming that it was their list. Yeah. And that was a hard pill to swallow, because I contacted the person. I don't remember the name. I don't remember a lot of details. But he was very standoffish, and no, it's on the internet. And I remember trying to contact a couple of people to help me, and I couldn't get a lot of traction, and that was very frustrating. And again, that plus other factors in my life, and as you say, now that there's information from Fryer, Mark's page was clearly having different level of quality of the information available. So at that point, my page started being irrelevant, and that's when I start pulling things out.
Yeah, which is a shame that it doesn't still exist, really.
I have backup somewhere. I've been trying to access those hard drives, but you'll be the first to see when I get there.
Well, we have to find it and put it back up, because I think it'd be a great thing to host somewhere so that we can start to capture this history as well, because I think we know quite a bit about the history of the Red Special now, or we think we do. So we know roughly when it was built. We can, through photos and information, understand roughly when some of the changes happened. We know that some things happened to it in 84, 85 with the pickups when he got involved with Guild with Damasio. We know that Greg Fry did some restoration work. We know that Andy Guyton's done some restoration work. We know that, but it'd be really interesting to capture the history of us starting to talk about it and record information, because, as you said, and we've said, later on in 25, 30 years, 100 years, when some kids find Brian May and go, I wonder how that all happened, and then we've got like the original web pages to where we are today. I just find that, I think that'd be a really great thing.
We'll make it work.
Yeah, to have somewhere for, because it's part of the story of it, isn't it? And it's part of the lineage of the guitar.
And again, that was the impressive thing for me listening to the podcast, that I never understood that that it helped anyone. I was doing it as a personal thing, but like a selfish kind of thing. But it was an interesting thing. It helped me, develop my skills of writing HTML and perfecting my level of English, et cetera, et cetera. But then when people are like, "Oh no, that was important," it's very interesting.
It was defining moments for lots of us finding it, and that again we've said about being an odd duck, but like, oh my God, there's someone else like me in the world, because someone's doing this stuff that I don't know how to do, but I'd love to have done that, or this is bringing me together with those same people. So it's the start of like Red Special on online dating, really.
It's a small world after all, like they say in the Disney ride.
It's a great ride. We need to lobby to have one of the little people in England playing a Red Special on that ride.
Well, we're starting that campaign.
Yeah, I think I know someone who could make the little Red Special for it as well.
Absolutely. We'll have Ron make an accurate size bridge. Absolutely.
We should do that. We should definitely do that. And then we can all go on the ride one day. And, we could do the meetup at Disney. That would be.
Oh boy.
The coming together of everything. But no, I think I just find the whole thing fascinating, right? And you take that step back out of your own head and how you we can often look at it from our own perspective, but take a step back, fly up in a helicopter and look at the whole situation, and there's pockets of like this happening all over the world at exactly the same time for different people, and then the internet happens at pretty much a perfect point to try and compile that, put it together, and then again as a byproduct starting to link those people with their common interests and giving you an outlet for your passion to say, Red Special is anonymous. I love the Red Special. My name's John Underhill, and I love the Red Special because, and
hi, John.
Yeah, I've got a severe problem with the Red Special. No,
we all do.
But it's just, I find the whole thing so fascinating, and I could talk about that specifically for such a really long time. And then, it's.
But also the fact that now we have access to Brian, either directly or indirectly. I think it was 05, 06. I actually probably have it written down. I sent an email to the Soapbox. I think I was showing you this when Volkswagen launched one of the models. It came with a guitar.
Yeah.
And the guitar was made by a manufacturer here in the United States called First Act.
Line. Yeah. So there was one in here last night. So Loring's got one.
Oh.
It's a shame because we could have had it in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember in the TV ad was with Slash playing it. And it's one of those, like, you look at it like, absolutely, this is inspiring the Red Special. And I send an email to the Soapbox to say, hey, have you guys seen this?
Yeah.
And, like, I'm at work, and I see my email pop up, and it's Brian May. Yeah. And he was like, oh, yeah, like, I've never seen it. I clearly inspired by my guitar. Yeah. And Brian May wrote me back.
Yeah.
Like, of course, not directly, but, I've never been able to even see the guy at that point.
Yeah.
So what a lovely ability to, again, Andy Guyton has been beyond nice to me.
Yeah. He is a lovely man and very talented and so helpful and giving and so thoughtful to the community as well, in not only what he does but sharing some of the stuff that he does. And he'll answer your questions, even the silly ones you have. He'll get back to you. He's just a true gentleman of the community, really.
100%.
Yeah, and I know. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. It's funny because, and I was kind of mentioned this before, but we're such a small community in a very large world of something so specific that, again, it's not like you have access to playing multiple AC30s or playing different kinds of Red Specials. for me, again, I wasn't old enough when Queen was touring South America.
Yeah.
You know, probably, again, it's there's distance. There's a number of different factors. So I never had the possibility of seeing Queen live. Although I'm pretty sure that on a vacation that I had in Brazil when I was little, Queen were in Brazil at the same time. So we might have been in the same country, at the same time. But until 2007, I think. Again, I have the dates over here, so let me look it up. Oh wait, I went to England with my friend Vesela Stoyanova, and we did a little bit of touring, and it was about being in England to go to the O2, general admission, get there 9 hours before so we can be. We were 26 and 27. I was a little disappointed, not very disappointed, but a little disappointed. I was not 1 and 2. And of course, we go in to Brian's side and hearing for the first time the humming of the AC-30s with no sound.
Yeah.
And you're like, what is happening here?
Yeah. And it's one of those things that you can't, even now, today, you can't go really to a guitar shop and pick up a Red Special off the wall and a treble booster and an AC-30 and wang it up full and hear that Snowstorm, because they don't let you, and because not many places have all of that kit, and the stuff Brian uses is quite specific. So it's quite an experience when you do hear it for the first time, because this is broken. Surely this is not right. That isn't how he gets that sound, because this is rubbish.
Correct. And you're like, how is any guitar sound is going to come out of that, and you can actually going to hear the guitar and not the hum?
Yeah.
And it absolutely does.
And it's another fantastic thing of the meetup is that you've got different AC-30s and guitars and treble boosters, and you can do all those things and hear it live. And that's before that. On the internet, you would speak to someone, and I remember reading about on brianmayworld.com, where I think Greg had been around and started making boosters for Brian, which Luke had the one from the Another World tour yesterday, which we played through a little bit, which was the start of then the making the treble booster touring, and you would only really know what other people had said about it, because you couldn't at that point upload clips to hear it. So it was like a written verbal of, the treble booster Brian's using is the Greg Fryer thing. You only buy them from Greg directly. You need to email him. And like complete blind faith, you're like emailing Greg in Australia asking for a treble booster, and you don't know what it sounds like because you've never heard it to know that that's right or not. And I remember getting my first one with an AC-30, turning it all up full, and being like, this is broken. I spent all this money and it's broken.
But it's funny because, again, the commonality that I think most of us have had one, if not a couple of hundred of those blind faith moments. I ordered my Guild. I've never played a Guild Brian May or a Guild guitar. There were no pictures. It was just a description.
Yeah.
And I spent a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
And then it was shipped halfway across the world. And it arrived in one piece.
Can you remember, it always gets me, can you remember the smell of it when you opened it?
So it wasn't new.
Right.
There was a distinctive smell in the case. And it's interesting because, you know that smell of all electronics?
Yeah.
It was kind of like a new version of that. It's similar. It's like in that vein, but it's not that same smell of the old electronics. But yeah, and again, I remember in the back of my dad's truck, like trying to pull the case out of the out of the big box, and like opening a little bit just to take a glimpse outside, and it was just the most beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I always make some analogies of this with one of the Indiana Jones movie, and the Last Crusade, when there's a lot of information, but until you have this one piece of information that now it makes sense. Like now it all makes sense, and there's a lot of that in this journey of information and finding things, knowing what things to let go, what things what things are important, and And again, the journey, not the destination.
Completely. And, you know, I sit here owning a Guyton Time Warp, and I feel immensely lucky to have been able
Which he didn't brought.
Yeah, it's a long way to go with a Guyton Time Warp. And the reason I asked about the smell is I remember going to the workshop to open it. I mean, we've recorded the podcast, so I think it described it, but what I didn't say and what you can't convey is when I opened the case the first time is the smell of the rustins, because it's been sat in the case, and the case smells like rustins. And
I don't know what rustin smells like.
well, you will do soon.
I hope so.
But whenever I put the guitar back in the case, because it doesn't live in the case, because if it did, I would never play it. It sits in our front room, so I can pick it up, which I don't do enough, which I always realise after the meetup. But if I ever want to cheer myself up, I put the guitar back in the case, shut the lid for a bit, come back and open it. And that smell makes me remember the happiness of picking it up. It's a great thing.
Absolutely. And again, there's so much. It's so much than just the sound. There's that sensation, and it's also very very funny when you have people that are not used to Red Specials and they try to sit with a Red Special to play, and like they don't know what to do.
No.
They don't know. Like, the switch is like it's all foreign to them.
And it's such a tactile thing as well, isn't it? And there's so many different elements to it. I think I tried to work out how many individual fixings and things there were on it recently. Is just something I was doing, and it's well over 130 individual items on the guitar when you consider each switch and then each screw that's in it and each roller and bridge block and shim, and it's you know, I can spend forever just looking at things, and everything's such a tactile object on it. The neck itself, the volute, is such a beautiful thing that they created, which is just immensely impossible to recreate easily without seeing it. And then everything is very, you know, the switches, you can flick switches on and off. It's like a giant fidget spinner or fidget toy.
But it is, and the the funny thing, playing Luke's guitar. So the Guild has for a regular guitar a massive neck.
Yeah.
For a Red Special, it's thin.
Tiny. Yeah.
It's tiny. But that's what I'm used to.
Yeah.
And playing Luke's, it's like this is ginormous, but it feels right.
Yeah.
Like this is it. It is factually big.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel big. It feels correct.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting one. It really is, because people will often say, "Oh, if you've got small hands, you can't play it." I have tiny hands, and I'd rather play the Red Special with a big neck than I do a Strat with a small neck, because it's more comfortable.
It's so much more comfortable, and and again, these are the kind of things that, having built a couple of guitars, I'm going to say studied with a luthier, then you start looking and you're like, how these two, this engineer and this kid with no training whatsoever on guitar making came up with, I'm going to claim, the perfect design.
Yeah.
And you see how factories have tried to approach this for now centuries, and they haven't even come close.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. Again, we've talked about lots of these things over the weekend, but I always think aesthetic design is so difficult to get right. And my background is engineering, so quite often it's not how it looks, but it's how it functions. And then you want it to look tidy or be able to be worked on. So it looks nice because it's uniform and complete, but it has a function. And clearly a guitar has a function, but it needs to look nice. And you look at the early Fenders and the Gibsons, they're the shapes for a reason. We won't go into what they're meant to resemble, but they're shaped in that way for that reason. So being an electrical engineer, originally myself, Harold being an electrical engineer, and then his son with no design experience that we know of, creating something that not only works but has the right amount of positive and negative space, has these features that, like the volute, which I think is an absolutely, that transition from the back of the neck into the headstock. It's
the
beautiful.
Absolute hardest thing to do from a woodworking perspective. Yeah. Why would that be your first solution for a problem? It's the engineer mentality. Yeah. If you can make it harder, make it harder.
Yeah, but also to make something that's functional and beautiful, that is a real talent, and that is something that is so rare. And companies spend millions of pounds, dollars on designing a new thing. like this microphone would have been designed, and that would probably have cost a lot of money to get this shape designed. So you've got the flat bit for your thumb on, and it does what it does. But they've got all this design experience. They can mock things up in CAD and whatnot. But you're talking about a father and son with some paper and some rudimentary hand tools crafting this thing that not only sounds iconic and individual, has all the right ingredients to make it sound that way, that's really difficult to replicate, and just by luck the pickup outputs and what they did, or maybe by design, works so well to create all those iconic tones. But it just looks stunning, and it's so bloody hard to make.
It is. And why did they put 3 pickups? Just put 1, or put 2, or put a humbucker. You know, again, making the parallel with Eddie Van Halen, when he started, toying with putting guitars together, I'm just going to put 1 humbucker and 1 volume, no tone.
Yeah.
Like, logically that would have been the solution,
Easy
and
way
they
out.
and they didn't go for the
No.
easy one, and they achieved something amazing.
And one of the things that always amazes me is, having tried to copy it, when you've got something to replicate, it's often easier because you've got a point of reference. But when you're making something new, you don't have anything to copy, so there's no rules. Obviously, they've taken influence from certain things, but like the knife edge and tremolo had never been done that way before. The roller bridge had never been done that way before. The wiring, arguably, probably had been, but maybe they hadn't known to do that. And like the engineering ability to take the scratch plate off and everything still works, so they could tweak it and then put the cover. Things like that just blow my mind, that they would think that far ahead at that point when they're making it. Because if I was to think about building a guitar for one of my daughters now, I certainly wouldn't be thinking about how easy to maintain it. If it, it seems like they made those decisions if it was to be really well used, rather than, I'm going to make this guitar for Brian and he'll probably not play it again in 3 years' time, so let's just make it as easy as possible. It was almost like they designed it to be taken on the road, so it was easy to work on at that initial point, and that blows my mind, because
It's a little bit like Back to the Future in an alternative reality. Brian, went to college, never played with Queen, and that guitar is sitting in a closet somewhere, in an attic.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it could be, couldn't it? And that's the thing. I got some really interesting ideas of questions if we ever manage to get him on the podcast around that. But
Looking forward to it.
so am I, if I don't freeze and he agrees to do it. But yeah. So Gonzalo, you've come back into it later on, or more recently. You've certainly been more active since being in touch with me. Obviously, then I start to follow you. You've got your own woodworking page. You also have got which is on Instagram. So you can go and look at Gonzalo's woodworking skills, and you're a very talented woodworker.
Thank you.
And
I don't think so, but thank you.
I don't think anyone ever.
I'm a better woodworker than guitar player, that for sure.
Well, you're a pretty good guitar player, so you must be a very good woodworker. So if you want to, you can head over to Instagram and look at G Plaza Woodworking and find Gonzalo over there and see some of the things he's doing. You can also see some of the progress on his guitars when he posts up. And it's just fun to watch what you're up to. And then you also got G Plaza Photo.
Yeah, I have. At some point when I came born and raised in Chile, I came around 2006 to the United States to work, and of course I stayed. And I've always had a visual, photography, video interest, and I start, taking pictures, buying more gear, as we do with all hobbies. So I also start making friends in Boston. Had a very nice musician community. Made friends with a lot of them. So I was going to a lot of smaller shows, taking pictures. So that can me entertain. But then after I moved to New Hampshire, having more space, could finally have the basement for myself. I can have my workshop. So I have deviated more towards woodworking than anything else.
But you do post on both, and so you can see Gonzalo's woodworking on the one, which is a good focus for anyone that's interested in woodworking or wants to see what he's up to. But you also post your adventures on G Plaza Photo as well, which is
correct.
Is,
That's kind of more. It has morphed more into like a more personal kind of things with travels and
trips to Disney,
food and trip to Disney and things like that. But for me, the woodworking is more of the open to the world, see what I'm doing, and I'm building a Red Special now. I'm going to call it like my modern version of the 84 Guild.
Yep.
So it's going to have reproduction DiMarzio pickups. The bridge is a Floyd Rose, I think it's called an FRX model, which again kind of on the idea of the Caller, but more of a modern version. And this will never be a perfect guitar by any standard, but this is where I'm starting to grow into my my next step. Do you know Mythbusters?
Mythbusters, yeah.
The TV show. So Adam Savage from Mythbusters, he's been posting a lot and podcasts and things like that, and he always talk about the rules of three. He's like, whenever I need to build something, I build three.
Yeah.
The first one is terrible, the second one is decent, the third one is up to par, and that's basically what I'm trying to build to.
So you're gonna build 3 Red Specials.
Yes, that's the plan. This one, which I called it the modern Guild 84. This in between this one and my second Red Special, I'm going to build what in my mind I call the Hammer to Fall guitar, which is going to be a Les Paul Junior with a 24-inch scale. So we all understand where I'm going with this. I'm going to inlay Spike's signature somewhere too. So it has to. The second guitar is going to be probably closer to a Super.
Yep.
It's probably going to be like a mix between a Super and a 93 Guild.
Yep.
And that's going to have Ken Armstrong's pickups that I have left I bought many years ago. And then the third one is where I'm going to go all in, with Cybershop hardware and Addison pickups that I already have. I will not mention how I acquired them, but thank you to the person that provided those. You know who you are. And that's where I want to have my, the ultimate goal of as close as possible.
It's a good goal. And we'll be able to all see how Gonzalo gets on his...
Very slowly,
but be able to watch on your Instagram channel. There's an interesting story came about yesterday that when you moved from Chile to the US, someone told you that you should change your name from Gonzalo because people wouldn't know how to pronounce it. And so you chose the name.
Of course. I'm not going to pick Brian. That would be too easy. I was, for a while, I was known as Harold Plaza.
So I think we should all call you Harold from now on.
I don't think that it's too big of a name for me, but it's a funny story because it's also not that hard.
Yeah.
It's Spanish, so it's phonetic. You read the letters. That's what it is. But for some reason, people tend to have an issue with the name. So it was funny, and people at work still make fun of me for it.
Does anyone call you Harold?
Like sometimes when they're pissed off at me, they bring the Harold.
I guess you could argue that we're talking about you starting off the website originally and creating that first step for all this on the internet. You could be the Harold of the Red Special community.
That's a lovely title. I'll take it.
Should be calling you Harold from now on.
Absolutely, I'll wear it with pride.
And there's another really interesting story that you've shared with us, which is about the guitar you got signed by Les Paul.
Sure. So my friend, my mentor, my friend that classical guitar luthier. So Eduardo was a classical guitarist not by trade. He went to school. All his life he studied, and he got to, very similar to other stories, to making guitars because he couldn't find a guitar that was acceptable for him. And somebody's like, then go build your own.
Yeah.
He was also, as a hobby, he was making stained glasses.
Yeah.
So he had hand ability and that's what started that whole thing. And at some point, I think it was around, I'm going to say 3 or 4, Eduardo was having a little bit of a fallout with making guitars. He wanted to go back to playing guitar. So he told me, I'm going to start like reducing the amount of work, trying to transition, etc., etc. And I don't know how I had the courage in me to say, will you build me a guitar? He's like, sure, what do you want? I'm like, an electric guitar. It's like, I don't build electric guitars. I'm like, I know, that's why. So, of course, it's based on the Guild 94, he template and everything. Then it's a lovely guitar. There's a lot of weird little things that we did here and there with Ken Armstrong Trisonics, with a Bixby tremolo, because again, we didn't have ability to get to any tremolo. So he made me that guitar. And somewhere along the line, I saw on Steve Vai's website that he played a show and Les was there, and he brought the guitar, his Evo, like his main guitar, to Les, and Les signed it on the back plate.
Yeah.
But it was wearing off because he, so I was like, what if I bring this guitar to the States and I have him sign in the back plate, but inside.
Yeah.
It's a copper plate basically. So came to the States to visit my brother, went to a wedding, took the bus to New York with the guitar, went to the Iridium Jazz Club, did the whole thing, waiting for, after the second show. Everybody was like, what's that? I'm like, it's based on a Brian May guitar. It's like, what's those switches? Explaining. And you see people's mind like exploding. It's like, I've been using a 3 or a 5-way switch all my life, and this makes so much more sense. It's impressive. But I had Les Paul sign my guitar, so I have it, hanging. I don't play it that much. But the guitar internally is signed by my friend who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. For me, signed by him, has his stamp. He used like an old wax stamp.
Yeah.
In the back plate is signed by Les Paul, dedicated to me. And I've always thought that this guitar will never be complete until what I call the 3 makers will sign it, which is the Luthier that built it, the father of the electric guitar, and Brian May. So that's, and again, it's about the journey, not the destination. I will be very happy if the destination gets at some point. But it's a very, it's an emotional piece. It's a piece of me. The Guild, if somebody would say, would you sell it? Hard for me to depart from it, but in a pinch, an emergency, maybe I'll consider it.
Yeah.
That other guitar, if my house was on fire, that would probably be after my wife and cats. That's the first thing coming out of the window.
I'd send the guitar first, and then wife and cats in that order.
Well, the wife knows to go grab the guitar first.
Well, I think it'd be a lovely thing, Gonzalo, if you could get it signed by Brian. Are you seeing them at all on tour soon, or are you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have any plans. I was fortunate enough to shake his hand twice during book signings, and you also try to be again respectful. I'm never going to demand anything, and if I ever meet Brian again, I will never demand. I would love if that can happen, but if he said no, I don't want to sign it, I will 100% respect that. I've seen him a couple of times tour with Adam Lambert, one time with Paul Rogers, but again, it's never been the right time, the right place.
Yeah.
If that happens, phenomenal. I will take it and I will cherish it all my life.
Well, you never know who is watching and listening to the podcast, and yeah, let's just put that. We'll say that.
And again, no pressure whatsoever. Like, it's what Brian and Harold and Pete and Andy and Ron and everybody else have given to the community is far more than a picture, a signature, or
definitely
anything.
100%. And I think it's just so. I think for me though, personally, it would be lovely if we could somehow get that signed for you.
I will take it, and I'll tell you a similar but dissimilar story. A couple of years ago, Jess was touring, and they were coming near where I live in New Hampshire, and they had meet and greet options. So I'm like, I'll do the meet and greet, and you only can bring two things to have signed, and everybody will sign whatever you want to sign. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bring the Innuendo album and have Steve Howe sign it.
Yeah.
And I got and clearly he doesn't like to do the meet and greet, and I don't blame him. Yeah. It must be terrible after a show having to do. And I said, Steve, if you don't want to sign this, I'm absolutely fine. And his face lit up. Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, beautiful album. And he signed it. So I had it behind the guitar. Yeah. The guitar that Les signed is the Innuendo signed by Steve Howe.
You've done some fantastic things, Gonzalo, and clearly the Red Special has started your journey off and has a lot to answer for in your life, and still does.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned to you the other day, when I die, I think my guitars will be flanking my casket.
No, it's a lovely thing, and it's so nice to meet people with the same experience and same love and same, you can, as we've been talking, both of us have got emotional at certain points because of what it means, and you're remembering things, and it's not necessarily just what the guitar means, but it's where it's led you to and who you've met and how unconsciously at certain times you've made decisions in your life to do something, and then when you take that step back 10 years later, you realize it's because of the influence that was there that subconsciously you probably didn't, or your subconscious was driving, and when you sit down to think about it, it comes back, doesn't it? And it's I if I can help you in any way with that, I would do my best to try and make that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, Gonzalo, it's been fantastic talking to you today.
My pleasure meeting you, and thank you for carrying the torch. Thank you for putting the meetup together in the UK, which very looking forward to going to one. Don't know when, but it will happen. And thank you for bringing the community together.
No, it's not me. It's the people in it. I think it's the people like yourself that I just maybe introduced a few people to people and then let them go. But I think, it's such a thing. It means such a thing to me and helped me through such difficult times and caused some difficult times, but it's been such a big part of my life that I think that needs protecting, and I can see that if it's been such a big thing for me, it's a big thing for other people, and I know it is because I speak to those people, that it's important that, I've got this saying, if you want something done and no one does it, you do it yourself. And so I really wanted to have meetups again because I thought we're missing a trick sometimes with it, and it's the meetups are definitely about the gear and the information and the guitars and stuff, but actually the real magic of the meetup is the people, and it's the meal on the Friday night, and then it's the meetup, and then it's the sitting around afterwards talking when all the gear's been put away. Those are the magical moments where you're creating those friendships, those lifelong friendships, and that's what needs to be protected, and that's what we need to celebrate. And I've been very lucky along the way, I think, to be able to do some of those things, and I've got great people to work with, so it's easy.
It's easy to talk with people. It's easy to interact with, and again especially hopefully coming out of COVID, and with all the craziness that's happening in the world, and with everything that's happening, it brings so much hope for the future, that you can see that you can go to a room full of strangers none of them are strangers, but they're all strangers, and we can all get along, and there's no jealousy, there's no, it's fraternal love at its peak.
Definitely, and it's a testament to everyone that falls into this rabbit hole, and thank you so much for reaching out a few years ago, or last year. It's been amazing getting to know you via messaging and keeping in touch and sending you rubbish and and whatnot, and yeah, you've helped me through doing this, and I just want to say thank you.
My pleasure. You're welcome. Thank you.
See you again soon, my friend.
My pleasure.
And that was Gonzalo Plaza. He's right there.
For real, apparently.
And if you've enjoyed the podcast with Gonzalo, as hopefully you will have, and you've enjoyed this video, please think about liking, subscribing, and doing all of that good stuff that you all know to do that I never remember to do.
And Patreon.
Patreon, yep. If you join Patreon, Gonzalo is one of the original patrons, and you get access to a little group of individuals who are also on there that we all talk about Red Specials and the world and everything in, and it's like the Red Special community on steroids for those of us that are there, and it's a great little place to go if you're feeling down or if you've got something to share.
Absolutely, it's that group of friends that that tight community of friends that you never knew you had, and they're all over the world. And it's fantastic.
It's great, isn't it? Because you post something up, and then half of them are asleep because of the time zone, and then you wake up and look, there's 30 messages to read.
It has happened to me a couple of times that I go to work and I come back and there are like pages, and I'm like, I need to catch up. I need like half an hour or so.
No, it's great, but yeah, thank you all so much for supporting the podcast. It's really pushed me on to seek people like Gonzalo out, and I've got some fantastic other people to speak to over the coming year and share some stories with. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you later on. Stay safe, everyone.
Rock on.